Lucy Letby. Appeal denied. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. Last August, I undertook a detailed analysis of Lucy Letby to determine what she is. Lucy Letby was charged with crimes, including the murder of several children, babies, and the attempted murder of others. She was tried and convicted. She became one of the few people in the United Kingdom that were given whole life term sentences, whereby it effectively meant that she would spend the rest of her life in prison. Her crimes horrified a number of people for their callousness, and it provided me with a wealth of material to analyse the type of personality that she is. There were some voices that declared that she was innocent, that she had been the victim of misinformation that had been placed before the court, and that she had been made a scapegoat for the failings of the hospital. A similar situation in the Netherlands was often quoted with regard to a nurse there who eventually had her convictions overturned. A particularly vocal American lady talked about how the situation was similar for Lucy Letby, that she was innocent and appeals would follow. And thus, the appeal was launched. For those of you who have not listened to my excellent and detailed series about her, I very much recommend that you go and do so. You'll learn a lot in relation to narcissism and psychopathy. For those of you who have, and for those of you who don't care about spoilers, I concluded that she is a narcissist. And therefore she maintains her innocence, because of course the conviction is a threat to her control. Not only is it the case that she is convicted of something which is viewed by society as a series of horrible, awful, evil crimes, which of course would impact upon any facade operating narcissist, but she's also been ordered to remain in prison and to be held there effectively until she dies. Thus, the conviction itself is problematic because of the nature of the crimes of which she has been convicted, threatens her control by damaging the facade and painting her as a child killer, a baby murderer. Added to that is the fact that she will never know liberty ever again. Accordingly, those are massive threats to control, and her narcissism maintains the stance that she didn't do it, that she's been set up, that people are mistaken. And therefore this, along with certain sympathisers, propels her to issue an appeal. As the BBC reports, child serial killer Lucy Letby has been denied permission to appeal against her convictions for the murder and attempted murder of babies in her care when she worked as a neonatal nurse. Letby of Hereford was convicted in August 2023 of the murders of 7 babies and the attempted murders of 6 others at the Countess of Chester Hospital between 2015 and 2016. Dame Victoria Sharp, sitting with Lord Justice Holroyd, said they had refused Letby's request to bring an appeal at a short Court of Appeal hearing earlier. The full reasons for the judge's decision were not made public, with the full details of Letby's appeal bid also unable to be published for legal reasons. Dame Victoria said, having heard her applications, we have decided to refuse leave to appeal on all grounds and refuse all associated applications. A full judgment will be handed down in due course. Shortly after her trial ended in August, Letby applied for leave to appeal against her convictions, which of course seeks to nullify the threat to control posed by those convictions. She lost the first stage of the process, in which a single judge reviewed her arguments as a paper exercise. Accordingly, the first bite of the appeal cherry is for her to issue a paper application which is reviewed by a single judge. He knocked her back. Thus, that refusal threatens her control, and the continuance of the conviction threatens her control. She then made an oral application through her barrister for the purposes of seeking permission to appeal. Namely, that wasn't an appeal hearing in itself. She had to get over the hurdle of being allowed to apply for an appeal, and she was refused that permission. The judge made reference to the fact that the appeal was based upon 4 instances concerning the judge refusing to allow certain applications during the course of the trial. Thus, it's undoubtedly the case that during the trial, Letby sought to perhaps admit certain evidence, exclude certain evidence, and made at least 4 applications, which the trial judge refused. That refusal, she deems, probably pursuant to advice, as being unfair, and thus giving her a ground of appeal. The appeal judges have disagreed. Accordingly, at a 2.5-day hearing last month, lawyers for the former nurse renewed efforts to bring an appeal before a panel of 3 judges. Because she's been denied permission to appeal, that brings to an end the appeal process for her. Thus, at 34 years old, those appeals have ended, and thus she is not in a position to challenge them, that challenge the convictions. Furthermore, she is going to face a retrial at Manchester Crown Court in June on a single count that she attempted to murder a baby girl known as Child K in February 2016. Thus, there will be further challenges to her need for control at that hearing. How does this all impact upon a narcissist? Well, of course, the provision of fuel will be reduced. Although she didn't have the largest fuel matrix to begin with, her fuel matrix has been significantly reduced by her being in prison. As a consequence of her being a baby murderer, she'll have been placed in more or less solitary confinement, protected from other inmates who may well wish to attack her as a consequence of the unpleasantness of her crimes. This means that she'll have limited involvement with other prisoners, will have some involvement with prison staff, guards, perhaps psychiatrists, visits from her lawyers, and potentially visits from family if they are still maintaining contact with her. Thus, she's not going to go into a fuel crisis, but her fuel levels will be a lot lower because she will spend a lot of her time on her own. This will result in a consequential impact upon her with regard to feelings of despair, feelings of anxiety, emptiness, loneliness, an impending sense of doom, and could potentially result in suicidal ideation also. The fact that her appeal has been denied, that she wasn't even granted permission to appeal, means that that's a further threat to control which will have wounded her. With already relatively low fuel levels, that news will have probably impacted upon her in a sense of being very upsetting for her, undoubtedly causing her to feel a sense of distress, feeling upset, no doubt breaking down in tears as a consequence of this news. She will feel that sensation of being wounded, although she won't actually know what it is. The fact that she remains incarcerated and that her appeal has failed are considerable threats to her control. On a daily basis, she faces the threat to control posed by the fact that she is imprisoned. That will be draining her fuel levels, which are relatively low also. She could be tilted, depending upon circumstances, into a fuel crisis, but she's not been put in one as a consequence of the reduction of her fuel matrix. She will still have a level of interaction with individuals that will enable her fuel levels to be sufficient to keep her ticking over, if you will. She's certainly not going to be buoyant. She will certainly feel anxious. She'll certainly feel empty. She'll certainly feel the presence of that chasm. She will have levels of fuel that will increase perhaps when she has visits, when she might receive correspondence, when she has an interaction with a prison staff member. But a lot of the time she is going to be left on her own. and the fuel level would be lower than it ordinarily would be for her. And with events such as the defeat of her permission to appeal application, the wounding that's caused by that will have a particularly impactful outcome on her by denting and blowing a hole in her already fairly low fuel levels, making it a most uncomfortable experience for her. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.